Well, hello, that's me again. Today is Friday. Thank God it's Friday. It's June 28th. And let's not procrastinate. Let's get to the thing which people probably would like to hear my opinion. And before we go into this issue of the debate between former President Trump and current president, what can I say? The national humiliation and embarrassment continues, and of course the world at large, except for Western media, they laugh. But you know what? So, and let me get you back to the famous quote by H.L. Mencken, one of the sharpest tongues or sharpest pens, if you wish, in the American journalism, and the man which obviously never pulled his punches. And yeah, that's pretty much explains what was happening yesterday, and this is what is absolutely true. As democracy is perfected, the office of the president represents more and more closely the inner soul of the people. On some great and glorious day, the plain folks of the land will reach their heart's desire at last, and the White House will be occupied by a downright fool and a complete narcissistic moron. It's H.R. Mencken, and what can I say? It's perfect. And to even describe to you the stupidity of people who comment on all that is, if you go and look up the quote of Mencken and the comments to it, there are many web resources dedicated to Mr. Mencken. They say that, it's not necessarily true. Mr. Trump, Biden, and Obama, Bush, they had their undergraduate degrees. Well, those idiots don't understand. Moron here is used not in educational way. It is all about, you can have 3 PhDs, and you can still be a moron. That's what people do not understand. But because we have here the straight, down the Dunning-Kruger effect, that you cannot explain moron that he's moron because he's moron. And that's what we saw yesterday. And as my good friend Larry Johnson pointed out, I cannot even, emphasize enough, because I totally on with him. He says in his piece, which he talks about Zelensky singing a different tune, he says, what I would tell you now, if you are looking for a post on Biden-Trump debate, sorry to disappoint. I watched a few minutes, and to put it bluntly, it's a horror show for Democrats backing Biden. So basically, yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't need to see it and, make it whatever you out of it, whatever you want. But it was the national embarrassment. So, and these are what Mencken's proverbial morons, because though Trump has been more coherent, well, we know Biden is not coherent at all. I don't know why they continue to abuse this man. But that was the American statesmanship on parade, and everybody saw it. Now, let's get back to what is really important, apart from this political show and circus, which is now becoming the nature of the American so-called democracy. And we will start with some very important changes in the overall tune, if you wish. And that's what Larry also posted. And if you go and listening to Zelensky, and I'll go to Larry's video channel, and Zelensky now singing different tune on negotiations. Suddenly this dude talks about that we have to have negotiations with Russia, Ukraine. Obviously, he never came up with it himself. You have this bunch of people who are actually have been represented yesterday on the stage on those debates, that they really want to negotiate now. Obviously, they do not want to negotiate on Russia's conditions, but you know what? At least they admit that they want to. And this is the guy who actually made sure that Constitution of Ukraine prohibits him from negotiating with Russia, and now he's talking about, well, again, Constitution in Ukraine is a really kind of conditional thing, circumstantial, and just to also to explain to you to what degree of not embarrassment, we know that it's embarrassment, but to what degree of the total delusion. The whole, basically elites and many people live in the United States. Here's, I want to point out that in terms of the foreign policy, as was predicted by me, that, they love Israel, they want to continue genocide. Trump certainly wants to continue with the genocide. So we have that situation. Trump argued that Biden has damaged America's reputation on the world stage and that it was one of the factors that convinced Russian President Vladimir Putin to launch military operations in February 2022. And this is going back to Mr. Mencken and his quote. Obviously, it's complete lie. It has nothing to do with reality. But Mr. Trump continues to operate as if the United States is some kind, mighty, military power which has a reputation built by losing all of its wars. So he says if we had a president that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine. It's an old Trump shtick. He thinks that he's so awesome, well, he's narcissist, that, somehow Putin wouldn't do what Putin considers absolutely critical for survival of Russia, which, by the way, of course, produced elites which are much older than any Trump or, for that matter, Biden or any other American elites. And he said Biden did nothing to stop it. I think he encouraged Russia to go in. So yeah, it's complete utter BS. But and again, Mr. Trump won't understand what military capacity and capability is. So the former president suggested that Putin saw the incompetence of Washington during the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan in 2021. It was the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, Trump said. When Putin saw that, he said, you know what, I think we are going to go in Ukraine. So it's a complete crap, obviously, the crock or, excrement, and actually the incompetence of the, of Washington and U.S. Army was seen already starting from 2003, actually, and then everybody saw what they needed to see, because the level of the U.S. armed forces, the only enemy they can fight is essentially, the enemy of the level of the 2003, circa 2003, Iraqi military. That's about it. This is pretty much the capability U.S. military has in conventional sense. So, and Mr. Putin also, not to be outdone, yesterday he stated, well, actually today, he stated pretty much damning things, because as I am on record, and many people know this, I don't need to elaborate on it, constantly. Russia is firing economically on all cylinders, and probably the growth is going to accelerate even more. And when you look attentively at the military production, especially of the high-end weaponry, which is high precision standoff weaponry, here's Mr. Putin actually, actually it was today, that Russia needs to start producing intermediate range and shorter range missiles. Russia has them, but he talks about the increase of the production and placing those things like 3M14 caliber on the ground launcher. So I think so when he stated this, the work already started on that. So he says that Russia needs to start producing ground-based intermediate range and shorter range missiles and make decisions on their deployment in proportion to the actions of the United States. He said Vladimir Putin on the operational meeting with the permanent members of the Security Council. And so he says, in any case, we need to respond to this and make decision on what we will have to do in this direction next. Apparently, we need to start production of these strike systems, and then, based on the real situation, make decisions on where, if it is necessary to ensure our security, to deploy them, the president stated. Russia has an enormous, wide spectrum of options in this respect, because it can start producing the ground launchers for 3M14 and 3M14M caliber land attack missiles, which fall under the intermediate range, sort of, and usually intermediate range and short range are under 500 kilometers. But at this stage, it doesn't matter. For example, you can consider 2,500 kilometer range regional 3M14 land attack missile of caliber to be intermediate range. It's, theoretically it is, so, and considering the fact fact that pretty much every single treaty on the arms control have been abrogated by the United States, you know what's happening now. Russia will increase production of the systems of which United States has no answer to. And no matter how they will try to pull your fingers in terms of the Patriots or whatever, so it doesn't matter. It takes one kinjal to take out basically the most important part of any air defense complex, which is its radar, and that will be it. And if that hasn't been enough, so, we have a lot of things happening in terms of the situation with a special military operation. And if you go today, well, actually yesterday, the data hasn't been updated for today, June 27th, we see that we have almost 2,000 military personnel killed and wounded all along the whole front line. We have 6 tanks and APCs, 33 armored vehicles, 50 artillery mortars. UAVs, actually Russia shut down for a week more than 600 of them. So this is the only thing which is left for Ukraine to use some kind of drones of all kinds, whatever they can muster, so to speak. 3 MLRS, multiple launch rocket system, including the HIMARS. And you have also the situation with planes. 2 MiG-29s have been shut down. So the slaughter continues, and it actually continues unabated, and the average daily losses are slightly above 2,000 for the last months. And so it's probably gonna bring us to the level of 60,000 killed and wounded for this month. And people correctly stated that I misspoke last time on the last video when I was talking about the 1.1 million mobilization potential or reserve of Ukraine, that it will take not 22 days, obviously. It will take about 22 months in terms of basically raising whatever is left there of Ukrainian generation of people. Actually, it's probably a couple generations, and Russia is certainly in there for the long haul. It's ready. It's ready for 22 or 42 months, and the West is not, and it doesn't have the capacity, it doesn't have resources, it doesn't have the military doctrine, and hardware, frankly, is laughable. So, and it doesn't mean that Russians do not sustain losses. Of course they do. But these losses are very, how to put it, moderate, to put it mildly. And obviously the New York Times, when they say about this, waves of Russians, they basically repeat the good old story, which have been planted in the very uneducated militarily American mind about those waves of Russians, during Red Army that, running without one rifle among 3 of them. And this all was basically very comfortable for United States and the West to, and for Germans, because they were sore losers, they got completely obliterated by the Red Army. And by the way, the comparison of the losses actually is not that horrendous. It's 1.3 to 1. So Russians did really well against the best combination of forces in history, which at that time in 1941 have been the Axis forces. But this thing, such as Mr. McGregor, continues to insist that, not understanding what barrier troops were, they were not really barrier troops, they haven't been shooting in the backs, they were there completely for the reorganization of catching all those people who were retreating, them reorganizing them, reforming them, and putting them back at the front line. But this is the whole other story. It's all myth, it's all legends perpetrated by such people as a low-life as Astafyev or Solzhenitsyn. And this is, I remember Mr. McGregor said that, he spoke to general. I don't know what kind of general that was, obviously not very bright general, but there are obviously the fully opened archives on Russia's and Red Army's losses. They are called Krivosheev's group, and it's very famous book. So, and actually there were two editions of this book, and everything is in there, including this legend that allegedly somebody killed million of Red Army soldiers, you know, the Beria Truce and Beria, or actually it was Beria St. KVD, which stopped what was primarily the killing and executing of the retreating troops by the Red Army commanders on the front lines. These were military themselves who were trying to stop their retreat in 1941 at the hardest times of the Great Patriotic War. So they obviously didn't execute 1 million. They execute somewhere within the probably first several months, up to the start of 42, something like on the order between 105 and 135, depending on the source, 1,000 of the Red Army soldiers. It was definitely a large number, but not a million. So basically people exaggerate and they sell this BS and they pretend that they know anything about warfare. They don't, especially about the Eastern Front. There are very few people in the United States of the scale of Mr. Jonathan House or David Glantz who really understand what was going on. So, but this is, you know, good old, you know, reaction of losers to, you know, this what is happening right now. And so if that hasn't been enough, and especially the desperation of Ukraine in terms of getting anybody to the front line, here it is. As you can see yourself, it is underlined. It's RNUA. UA means Ukraine, and it was there based on the Union, which is the main inform agency, well, propaganda agency of Ukraine. So guess what? Now, yesterday, they introduced the new kind of legislature, which is those liable for military service who do not update the data on the TCC. It's TCK, basically the centers which grab people from the street and throw them onto the line of the combat contact, where they pretty much most of them get killed. So they now say, oh yeah, if you are of anybody age between whatever 18 and 65, I believe. So look it up. I mean, I'm not interested in all those ranges anymore. So you need to go and update your data, thus betraying obviously your location, you know, at those centers. And those people who will not do that, they will be, of course, charged a very handsome sum of 160,000 hryvnias, whatever. It's a lot of money in Ukraine, and most people will not be able to pay them back. So they have to pay this penalty. If not, and most people will not be able to do this, guess what? They will take their apartment taken away. Those very few precious things that people own, which is, of course, their, you know, living quarters, well, and as you can see yourself, this is reported by Region News with a reference to Union. So there you go. There are actually slaughter and abuse of the Ukrainian population continues in Ukraine. And what can I say? What do you expect? What do you expect? And as a result, then Mr. Zelensky suddenly recognizes that he needs to talk. Obviously, they will be like the eel, you know, fresh from the water, which is like slimy. You cannot hold him, you know, in your hands. It tries to, you know, like the snake, you know. So they try to, you know, get out of your hands, grip, and but no, not gonna happen. So, and in this case, it's just a matter of whatever Austin tried to communicate to Belousov, but as I already stated, you can read this all over the news. Russians are preparing to make life of the United States assets, including the military bases abroad, really miserable. So, and this is the, you know, the revenge is the dish best served cold. And Russians are not in the knee-jerk reactions, except for obviously Russian media, which are pretty much the same morons as for the most part, as the media in the United States, let alone in Great Britain. But I want to also pay attention to you that behind all this, you know, How to put it politely, it's ridiculous developments in the political life of United States and the Western world, and the panic of the Democrats, good riddance of them from them. So Russia continues to actually increase its machine building production tremendously. If you take a look at the latest data, you will see yourself that total production of machine tools, that means machining centers, all kinds of those lathe, milling machines and things like that, increased by 21.5% in January, April. In the first 4 months of 2024, a total of 18.6 thousand machine tools were produced. The report of no less than actually Higher School of Economics. This is one of the last the places, localities where all those crazy liberal or neoliberal economics BS is taught, and they are primarily pro-Western, pro-liberal, type of people there. But even they have to admit that, hey, look at this, Russia is just increasing machines, production of the machines tremendously. And so they explain that what kind of the machines they are. And if you take a look at January, April 2024, most of them have been the machining centers for metal cutting, and not cutting, machining centers, 3,432. Then, of course, metal cutting machines, 2,898. And there were all kinds of them, including obviously milling machines, and very large number of the, as you can see yourself, the output of numerically controlled metal cutting lathe, which is 309 pieces. It's CNC, numerically controlled, and increased by more than 50%. Now the data still continues to pour in, and look at this. And if we compare to 2024 with the pre-sanctions 2021, look what is happening. Metal working machines are also leaders in terms of production in January, April 2024 compared to the same period in 2021. Get those numbers. They grew more than 2.5 times production of it. Next are metal cutting machines, of which 1.5 thousand pieces were produced in January, April 2021, and 2.9 thousand pieces in January, April 2024. The growth of almost twofold. Machine building sector of Russia, ranging from the obviously advanced CNC machines and all kinds of the metal cutting, metal processing equipment, grows just like crazy. I mean, you look at this, and this will continue. And then, of course, that means, and I'm not talking about the wood, woodworking machining centers, so which also very important. So when you take a look at it, you pretty much get the idea where it is all going. And at some point of time, I need to look it up at the production of the, for example, equipment, similar equipment in the United States, and you will see yourself that Russia is going to catch up, and eventually is going to not only catch up, to exceed it by the very large margin. And that means only one thing, and that's what everybody understands. Russia produces a lot of machines, all kinds of them, from rolling stock to aircraft, to even satellites, to, and of course, military industrial complex. And here we have this news today. It's a beautiful ship, by the way. Ivan Papanin, the latest of the combat icebreaker of Russia. It's a 9,000 tons, displacement, large icebreaker capable to crush through almost 2 meters of ice. It's a pretty nice looking machine. It is obviously all computerized and things of this nature. And as you can see yourself, it started its sea trials. Today it was tagged by, by the tugs into the sea, where it will start trying its engines. And when you look attentively at its armament, it's obviously the artillery piece and all kinds of the machine guns. It also carries the 2 helicopters, I believe 2 with itself, but it also capable of carrying the container versions of the Caliber missiles, both anti-shipping and land attack. And that makes this icebreaker the owner of the all other icebreakers in the world. And this is not just it. So if that hasn't been enough, now we have this this situation, which I wrote about in my blog yesterday, and very many people do not understand. And I want to stress this issue, that what Soviet naval units of the border guards, which is commonly known as today as Coast Guard, were. They obviously had some similarities with, for example, U.S. Coast Guard, but if you take a look attentively at the older ships of the Soviet Coast Guard, these are the first-rank cutters. As you can see yourself, they have anti-submarine warfare package, from the, jet, depth charges to rocket depth charges to anti-submarine torpedo tubes, the 100mm artillery, air defense complex, missile air defense complex. So, and as you can see yourself, this is pretty much the frigate, a full-blown frigate. And now, then suddenly, Pella, the very famous wharf, which produces a lot of, those Karakurts, small missile ships capable of carrying all those nasty things like Onyx and Caliber missiles, they developed this thing. So, and this thing is based on Karakurt. And as you can see yourself, this is the new version of what they want to get back, so to speak, to the basics of the Soviet naval units of the border guards or Coast Guard. This is the new version of the patrol ship, which most likely the Russian Coast Guard will get. But when you look at its package, it is insane. For 670 tons of displacement, apart from 100mm gun and two Gatling guns, AK-306, and bunch of the other, machine guns, that thing carries with itself, apart from a very comprehensive electronic suite, it has the ability to actually defend the formation. Air defense. It will have the air defense complex resource, which is, for all intents and purposes, not budget, but yeah, you can say it, budget versions of the mainstay of Russian frigates, famous Polymet Redoubt, which is known today as S-350. So you have the kind of, this version of this thing on this small ship, and a resource has the range of up to 30 kilometers, and it is capable to shoot down pretty much anything which is out there. So, and there you go, that's Russian Coast Guard for you, okay? So I don't know if they're gonna put, actually people say, yeah, you can stick probably Caliber missiles on it, then that's your Coast Guard ship, which is, of course, that becomes missile corvette. And well, how to put it politely, there all this, the situation in the world today calls for Russian Coast Guard being back to being armed to the hilt. And this all comes also on the, so to speak, in the wake of very surprising, how to put it politely, reflective article in Foreign Policy about the end of American exceptionalism in the High North. After years of inattention, the United States is playing catch up where it once held significant sway. And they are talking about actually icebreakers. I don't know when United States actually had this significant sway, but in terms of the Arctic development and study, and of course in terms of the icebreakers, Russians have been leaders in the world. I'm not talking about those small, bases, maritime bases, icebreakers Germans developed. No, we're talking about the major icebreakers. And they talk about it, that yeah, all the Stratton, and they are reporting it from the really beautiful, I love those ships, I mean those national security cutters, and they have been on the board of Stratton, and Stratton crew was up to this task. The equipment was not. About the ice, a brief tour aboard the cutter shed light on the U.S. Coast Guard's operational limitations and resource constraints. Unless Washington significantly shifts its approach, the Stratton will remain a microcosm of the United States journey in the Arctic, because obviously those beautiful ships, make no mistake, they're just gorgeous ships, those national security cutters, they are incapable capable, obviously, to go into the serious ice. And so after the fall of the Soviet Union, such exigencies seems excessive. When they talk about the development of the American icebreakers, the North once again became a domain of a partnership among Arctic countries. Well, yeah, a period that many call Arctic exceptionalism, or as Norwegians put it, high north, low tension. What reality, of course, they talk about Russian hypersonic munitions and things like that. But if you take a look at Russia's Arctic development and what is being placed there, I don't think so United States has resources to catch up. It certainly doesn't have resources to catch up in terms of the icebreakers. And here it is. This is what they talk about. First and foremost, it is limited icebreaker fleet. The United States has only 2 working icebreakers. Of these 2, only one, the US CGC Healy, is primarily deployed into the Arctic. The other one, Polar Star, is deployed to Antarctica. By comparison, Russia, which has a significant Arctic Ocean shoreline, has more than 50 icebreakers. And a huge number of those icebreakers are, of course, nuclear-driven icebreakers. This is, you cannot catch up with this, because obviously what Russia is building now in terms of the leader class, I don't know. I mean, engineering task of doing this is monstrous. It's something on the level of developing, and well, probably even more complex, of developing new commercial aircraft, or even combat aircraft. Way more. So, and this is what I wanted to tell you, and these are the pieces of information which, you have to keep in mind, because so much is happening around the world right now that obviously 30 minutes are not enough for me to kind of put everything together, and my task is to give you a little bit here and there things, So, and this is what I wanted to give you today on Friday, and, just want to wish you a good weekend, guys. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel, and those who can afford, please support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee on too. I would really appreciate this. So this is it for today, guys. Have a nice weekend. Bye bye.